But before Danielle comes up and talks about her experiences in Scotland, we have some announcements about the Library Research Prize that we've held annually now. This is our second year. Last year, Taylor Ferda won first prize, if Taylor would wave or stand up. And we didn't have this really cool traveling trophy to give him. And so Taylor, if you would come up and grab this. Now, the sad news is he doesn't get to keep it or put it in his dorm room. It's going to the history department, who is people he wrote the paper for. And so the history profs get to keep this really cool prize under lock and key so it doesn't disappear. And you can just hand it off.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's a very unique thing. And I guess I'd just say really quick, I don't want to take too much time, but I think it's just a good reminder for students who are trying to win this that we would like to think it's mostly on our own merit that we do this, but I think it's a reflection of kind of the academic culture of Bethel, that they have professors who are interested in their students' lives and willing to help them try to do stuff like this. So, congratulations.
Let's make it run enough money.
Congratulations. Yeah, very good.
And to all other departments on behalf of the history department, I just want to say bring it. We intend to keep this every single year.
At least till April 7th. Okay, this year's winner, the Library Research Prize, is for a student essay, a student research paper that made significant use of the library resources, and they not only submit the paper for examination, but write an essay on the process of using the resources in the library to do the research and to write the paper. And this year's first prize winner for a $250 stipend and a chance to present at one of the sessions is Nathan Cornelius, who wrote a paper for an art history course called Innovation and Harmonization in Raphael's Stanza della Signatura. So Nathan, if you would stand up. Congratulations. He's going to be presenting at this time on April 7th. And his paper came with, he's analyzing a room of coordinated pictures in the Vatican. And that's not in the Vatican. It is in the Vatican. It is in the Vatican. And he'll have some nice pictures to show and just a nice discussion of how all of these things fit together. So yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And on April 7th, we'll present the cool trophy to the art department. Thank you very much. Now this year we hadn't built this into the system, but this year there was a second paper that we just didn't want to fade into oblivion. And so on a one-time basis, we've created a second prize with $100 attached to that. And that's a paper by Eric Magnuson, who wrote it for, if you would stand, for the history department, The Convictions of Pope John Paul II, an exploration of liberation theology in Latin America, and an analysis often using a lot of primary sources of how John Paul interacted with the burgeoning issue of liberation theology and some of his stance and some of the analysis of his attack on that. And so congratulations on the paper. And I think at this point we're going to turn it over to someone to introduce Danielle.
Alright, just a little bit more information about Primetime at BU Library. The mission is to encourage lifelong learning beyond the classroom for faculty, students, and staff through presentations which are collaboration between many different offices on campus like ours in International Studies with the Friends of the BU Library. You won't want to miss the next Primetime presentation, which is next Thursday the 24th. We'll be welcoming Angela Shannon and Herb Johnson for the Black History Month Music and Literary Review called Let Justice Roll Down. So today we'd like to welcome Danielle Johnson, who's going to present about her time in Scotland.
Good morning, everybody. Well, thank you, first of all, just for coming and listening to me talk. And to those of you who don't know me, I'm Danielle. And I'm a junior here at Bethel, and I spent my fall in Scotland. And I just had a really incredible experience there, and I just wanted to share that a little bit with you. And it's going to be mostly on my involvement with traditional music and learning the Gaelic language, but also just random things that I enjoyed. And so a theme of studying abroad was just kind of like unpredictability, and so you might see that a little bit in this slideshow. I'm also a history major here, and I finished a minor in classics. So I'll give you a little history of certain aspects of Scotland. Yeah, so I spent fall studying at the University of Edinburgh, and that's spelled Edinburgh, and I was told never to make this mistake of calling it Edinburgh, so yeah, being called Pittsburgh just to be safe. That was a big change for me. It was a lot bigger of a university. I had classes of about 200, but it was also really interesting. The classics department there was huge, so that was exciting because it's pretty small here. And this is where I lived. I lived in a university flat, and this was called Hermit's Croft. And the name scared me a little bit. I was like, Hermit's Croft, a farm far away. But it was actually right next to Arthur's Seat. You can kind of see that in the back a little bit, which is an extinct volcano and really pretty. So that was just awesome. And I was living in Old Town, which is a part of Edinburgh, which has a ton of historical significance and just a lot of really pretty architecture. And so I'm just going to be plugging, you should go to Edinburgh if you ever have a chance, probably throughout this whole presentation. So I had 5 roommates while I was there, and surprisingly none of them were Scottish, and none of them were actually even from the UK. I had 2 American roommates and 1 roommate, Daisy, from Hong Kong, and this is Elisa, who is from Norway. And we just bonded really well over our love of Jane Austen, as you might be able to see. That was also a theme of studying abroad. I met a lot of Scandinavian people, and my closest friends actually were mostly Norwegians, which I probably wouldn't have guessed. And it's close to Scotland, but that was a surprise. And that's just a view out our window, and I wanted to put a sunny picture of Scotland because I was warned that it would just be raining all the time, and I actually had lovely weather, and it was, yeah, sunbeams and green, so don't be misled, although it does rain sometimes. And here's a picture of the crags. This is what I lived right next to. Arthur's Seat is below to the right. And yeah. That was a fun place to climb it and see this. And before I give you a brief Gaelic lesson, I'm going to talk a little bit about studying Gaelic. And actually, technically, Scots prefer it to be called Gaelic, but I'm working on making that sound natural to me. There's a lot of talk about Gaelic dying in Scotland, which a 2001 survey showed that like 1% of the population actually speak it like regularly, but recently they've been trying to like preserve it and actually like start having Gaelic schools to teach Scottish people and kind of just have a resurgence of that sort of culture. And some people, while I was there, were like, "Why are you taking that? No one will speak it." And I've been studying Latin before, and so I have a soft spot for dead and maybe dying languages. I would just like to emphasize the importance of learning things that might not seem relevant to everyday life. And I really found that in Gaelic, especially in the songs and the poems that were created. And I'm going to give a brief history of just Gaelic culture and when the language started to die out, because it's actually really influential in the traditions of Scotland and how they find their heritage. So if you don't know, Scotland kind of has 2 regions, the Highlands and the Lowlands. And surrounding the Highlands, there's been like a traditional stereotype that they've been like, rough, barbarous people and just very rugged, and they're the traditional Gaelic speakers. And in the 1500s to the 1700s, the Gaelic culture in the Highlands began to break down. Traditionally, they were organized with chiefs and clans, and that's when you think of the tartans, and each tartan goes to each clan. But their whole chief system started breaking down, and there was feuding, and this is really when the violent Highlanders image really was portrayed, and the government was asserting authority with dealing with this Highland problem. They saw them as kind of a violent threat, so they wanted to subdue them. And around this time, Lowland Scotland turned Protestant, and about 1500s in the middle of that. And this was reaching the Highlands more slowly. There was more Catholicism. And so now the people in the Highlands were perceived as violent, and also they're problematic in their religious terms. And if you know anything about the UK and the whole Catholic Protestant, it's been a very important feud in their history. And so now the government had more incentive to kind of shut down the Gaelic culture. And so now the chief system is really becoming less and less prevalent, and so there's not a lot for the Gaelic culture to surround themselves and have a stable resistance to oppression from the Lowlands and the English government. And probably one of the most important, I think I have the picture. Okay, yeah, here it is. One of the most important struggles of the Gaelic people was in the 1600s, and there was a Jacobite uprising, and the Gaelics surrounded on the side of the Jacobites who were fighting against the royal crown of England. And in 1689, there was 1746, the Battle of Culloden took place, and this is when all the clans kind of rallied together for their final stand against the non-Jacobite forces, and they were pretty much just slaughtered here. And I got a chance to go to this field, and it was really misty and very somber. And a lot of the people I was talking to around this area this is a very important part of their history, and just the sadness and the reverence they speak of this is just very instrumental in their understanding of themselves as Scottish people, especially living in the Highlands. So this was on a trip up to the Highlands, and there's a stone marking where the chief of, I think, the McGillivan clan fell, and sorry, well, I have another picture, but that will come up. But yeah, so that also is connected to the Gaelic language, because as the social structures were breaking down, the Gaelic language was also breaking down, and when they wanted to trade or just connect with the lowland Scotland, people wouldn't understand Gaelic, and so English is also starting to creep in. So there's a lot of factors that are just diminishing the use of the Gaelic language and making it a little more obsolete. So that is why when the Highlands traditionally were all Gaelic speaking, the English became definitely more prominent. And so after the Jacobite uprising and quelling of that rebellion, a lot of the Gaelic Highlands were cleared. A lot of the clansmen were killed, and there was a lot of immigration migration from the Highlands to the Lowlands, or even to Canada. A lot of Scottish people are in Cape Breton. In fact, there's some people who still speak Gaelic there, and so that was also more scattering of this Gaelic culture, which was very tightly knit and important to preserving the Gaelic language. So, yeah, so that was the decline of the Gaelic culture, and also the Royal Crown. At a certain time, they wanted to obliterate all other chances of Highland uprisings. So they banned all Gaelic culture. They weren't allowed to wear their kilts. They weren't allowed to play music, and so that just kind of put an end to a lot of the building of the Gaelic culture. And it took a while, and then it started to research again. And then during the period of Sir Walter Scott, then there was a switch, and Gaelic people were started to be seen as very romantic, like, oh, William Wallace and Braveheart, and, well, maybe not Braveheart, but like, just very romanticized. And so then there was more interest in the Gaelic language. And so it was somewhat genuine, somewhat like this created, like, the Gaelic people or something. So that started to pick up interest in the Gaelic language again. And recently, in the Scottish Parliament, they've made an act to start implementing Gaelic like signs in public places, and just they really want to research that part of their culture. And so that is how I ended up taking Gaelic language, which was an adventure. I'll say a little bit to you. Right here it says, Shemisha Danielle, or Hamias Nestakshin Malinva, Hamia Gyaragam Batatas. And I just said, I'm Danielle, I'm from the United States. Then I said I like potatoes. That was my favorite word. It was kind of interesting. My class was composed, I would say, 80% of international students from not just America, but other places. So I think there's still like remnants of us romanticizing the Highland people, and it's not actually like as traditionally Scottish as you think. But there were some Scottish people, and they're very excited about learning the language. But it's a phonic language. You might not pick that up from the way it's spelled, but that was a very difficult part for me. And this word right here is the word for Scotland, and we spent 20 minutes one day correctly pronouncing this. And so just to make my teacher proud, I'm going to teach you guys how to say this. So it's not Alba, but it's Alba. And we said that for about 15 minutes in a class. And yeah, and to make this interactive so you guys don't get sick of my voice, if anybody wants to volunteer to try and pronounce this word, which is actually the word for the Highlands, they can wear a Scottish scarf for the rest of the presentation. And there's no harm in failing, because that was what our class did for the first half of the semester. So, Leah, I think you wanted to. Okay.
I'll try it.
Oh, yes. Okay, awesome.
Give me a second. Okay, the top.
That was actually pretty close. Does anyone else want to contest for the scarf? Give it another try, or you might. Okay, you get it for participation. One of the main things about learning Gaelic is don't be just daunted by all the vowels and syllables, because this is actually a Gael talk. And I learned another rule is when in doubt, add like a guttural sound. I'm actually kind of glad my professor, he might not approve of that method of learning it. And a lot of Gaelic words are surrounding like weather and sheep and farming, and so there was a lot of life in the Highlands, and so I learned a lot of words for stormy weather. And I looked today, and I decided to give a weather forecast for you in Gaelic, and it's Haifliach agus fuar an Jew, and that means it is cold and rainy today, or rainy and cold. So yeah, and that's actually interesting. BBC is also starting to do weather forecasts in Scots-Gaelic as a way to make Gaelic more heard and accessible and easy to learn for the Scottish people. So yeah, that was nice. And people do wear kilts, and this is a formal parade. I forgot what it was for, but you see people wearing kilts in everyday life, which I approve of. I thought that was good. But it's mostly on guys, so I didn't pick up that fashion. But yeah, and this is a picture of the Highlands, and actually the Harry Potter train goes by on that, and we saw the last voyage of it, so it was very touching. And yeah, and I just fell in love with the landscape of Scotland. I just wanted to share a little bit of that with you. Yeah, if you get a chance, it's worth it to go. And these are some Highland coos. I just wanted a chance to say that in front of people. That's my favorite Scottish animal. Yeah, and so these are more pictures, some sheep, and yeah, and we went to a sheep farm, which is farming is a very instrumental part of the Highland life, and this is a sheepdog farm. And it was really fun. And there's me shearing sheep, which is on the picture of this presentation. And someone was asking what that had to do with language and music, and nothing really, but it's very Scottish, so I'll clear that up. And this is from the battlefield of Culloden. It was very ominous. And here is another monument to each stone. Is a person who died from a clan during the war, and they would bring a stone to battle, and if they survived it, they'd bring the stone home. And so these are all the ones that were left. And it's just very sobering, just because you see it as a just kind of destruction of the last of the clans of Scotland. So, yeah, and here's a drain pipe with Celtic symbols on it. And I think that'll lead into my discussion on Scottish music. I've been playing violin for I think like 12 years, and I've been traditionally a classical musician, I guess. And when I was in Scotland, I really got involved with traditional music, and it is just so fun. It's very laid back. This is just a traditional session where anybody can come and just play. Those two girls are some close friends I made, and a fiddle is a very common instrument in this. A lot of tin whistles and flutes. And bagpipes are not usually in these sessions, although there's quiet indoor bagpipes. But there are a lot of bagpipes in Edinburgh, especially because it's very touristy in certain areas. And I think the funniest bagpipe story I heard was a bagpipe rendition of Queen's "We Will Rock You." I saw that as their attempt to modernize a traditional music. That was, I applaud their efforts. And I think I had a friend who heard "Chasing Cars" by Snow Patrol, and that was also another interesting bagpipe experience. But yeah, they would be playing outside every day. For me, it was a nice reminder that I was in another country. We'll go to that. Yeah, so I joined the Traditional Folk Society. There's a lot of societies at universities over there. I also joined the Mediterranean Gastronomic Society, and they have a chocolate society, but I didn't want to overschedule myself, so that was high on the list. The Folk Society really taught me the value of traditional music. It's a very social kind of music form, and the nice thing is there's not as much like hierarchy of like one person's going to play and then someone's going to wait. Although and there's a lot of teaching, and the way like a session will run is someone will start playing a tune they know, and then everybody will join in, and someone will shout out another one, and they'll keep playing, and it's just very fun, and it roots to the Gaelic tradition. It's actually interesting. When the Gaelic culture was pretty much illegalized, like they weren't allowed to play on their traditional music instruments, and so they created Gaelic songs which would capture the beats and imitate the sounds of the instruments, so they wouldn't forget their traditional songs, and they're still played now. And it's just a very interesting connection to the past, because a lot of young people do traditional music. And also, I probably should, that's next. Ceilidh culture is very important. That's a traditional concept, but it's also very common. I found this record in the store, and I would pass it around because it just shows the greatest things Ceilidh has to offer. It's like traditional dancing, kind of like a Scottish equivalent of square dancing or contra dancing, but I would say a little more fun, and it's like the popular thing to do. That's what college students go do. And if you go to Scotland, I highly recommend doing it because it's quite fun. And yeah, so that was another aspect of the traditional music that I became involved in. And I had a friend who taught me their favorite Scottish children's song, and I just found this really funny. And it was called "You Can't Shove Your Granny Off a Bus." And it's sung to the tune of "She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain." And the next verse is "You can shove your other granny off a bus because she's your pappy's mammy." But I didn't want to put that kind of hate on about the presentation. So, and the third verse is just too far. It's "You can push your ugly cousin off a bus." But this is the favorite song of, or according to my friend, of all Scottish young children. And so, so yeah, that's a little charming aspect of the Scottish soup on there. Here, this is a Robert Burns poem. I get asked a lot about haggis, and I tried it. It was okay. It was very anticlimactic, but haggis is sheep's stomach stuffed with oatmeal and like intestines and spices, and it sounds really gross. And yeah, but it was fun. And this is just a funny poem about haggis that I decided to share. And I think, oh, I don't know the state on the presentation. This was a Santa run for Make-A-Wish Foundation that my friend from Ireland and my friend from California and I became a part of, and there was about 2,000 Santas, and it was running for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And I guess that can show the connection and friendships with people from other cultures. And that was a theme of my study abroad, I would say, just having fun and doing random things with people who I normally wouldn't know. So that was another interesting thing. This is Scottish. Oh, and where did I put that back on? Okay, and that is my presentation. But before I let you ask questions or go to class, I decided I would play a brief Scottish jig for you. Okay, you have to bear with me because this is not my strong point, but I thought it'd be fun. And usually, just imagine a guitar or a tin whistle or something involved with, and usually these songs are taught by ear and like played from memory, but I didn't want to get nervous and mess up, so I'm playing from, so this is not traditional jazz, but besides that, so, and apologies to anyone doing homework.
Well, okay, this is going to be two short tunes. The first one is called A Jig of Slurs, and there's actually a lot of influence of Irish music, which is very similar, just a little more, I would say a little more smooth than Scottish music, kind of like the landscape. Scottish music was more up and down and just, to me, a little brighter. And then the second song is called Athola Highlander, so I figured that would be a good note to end on. end of my presentation. And if anyone has any questions or recommendations for nice Scottish music to listen to, I'm here. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
I have a question. When you were in your Gaelic class, did they talk about the difference between Scottish Gaelic and Irish Gaelic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To them, it's not even. It's like there's connections, but it's not the same language. They technically, my teacher was very particular on names. So there's Scots-Gaelic and Irish. The Irish Gaelic technically should just be called Irish. So yeah. But I did go to Ireland, and I was able to have a conversation with an old man for about 30 seconds in Gaelic. And after that, he told me, "Enjoy Ireland, because you'll never be back." Why will I never be back? But, so that was his opinion. It was interesting. Any other questions? Or if not, I hope you have